Hello and welcome to Cult Movie Cult, where we watch and discuss the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. I'm Marc Dickerson.
And I'm Jeremy Fink, and this is the fourth episode in our series Practically Terrifying, a celebration of 80s creature features. Today we're discussing 1988's Cellar Dweller, directed by John Carl Buechler, written by Don Mancini of Child's Play fame, and starring Deborah Farentino, Brian Robbins, and Yvonne DiCarlo. In the film, Colin Childress, a successful comic book artist who gains inspiration from a mystical book of horrific drawings, inadvertently summons an evil monster into his basement studio. Decades later, his house has become a small art institute. One night, student Whitney Taylor, a devotee of Childress's work, goes looking around the sealed boxes in the cellar and releases the supernatural forces trapped there.
That's the ghost of Colin Childress.
30 years ago, he butchered a woman with an axe and then set himself on fire.
It's dark, it's gloomy, it's filled with terror.
Don't even think about going down there.
So why can't people stay out of the cellar?
I love being frightened.
If you love to be frightened, then this cellar is the place to be.
Yeah, this is again a lower budget production, similar to The Deadly Spawn, which we talked about a couple movies ago. And there were a couple movies floating around, Jeremy. We were trying to solidify the series and the films we were going to discuss, and we threw around The Fly, Rawhead Rex, but we ended up settling on this one. And I mean, do you think this was a good call for the next one in our series?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. I mean, I know we talked about kind of wanting to go back and forth between kind of more well-known, creature features, and then to some that maybe our audience might not have seen, or or maybe had seen once a long time ago and didn't remember. So I think this is kind of a fun one. I think what's cool with this one is it kind of has almost a little bit of a Frankenstein kind of thing to it. In the idea of it being about the creator of the monster kind of having to face his or her, in this case, her own creation. Which, if we're talking about creature features, you're kind of going back to it's kind of inspired by one of the ones that started it all. If it's kind of a Frankenstein adjacent.
Yeah. So I actually didn't make that connection, but I think you're right about that.
Yeah, it kind of to me felt like, I mean, obviously, Frankenstein is exploring something a little different because it's I guess the movie of Frankenstein, he's kind of portrayed as a little bit more of a lunk, an aggressive lunk, for lack of a better term. But, in the Frankenstein book, he's kind of more erudite and expressive. But, in this one, it's like, obviously in this one, the monster is more of like a monster. Frankenstein was a little bit more of a human monster. This one kind of was just like a rampaging, a beast. But, I always think it's fun when you get into something where it's the idea of the creator of the monster having to face their own creation. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a fun concept, and this one is definitely pure schlock, I would say.
Yeah.
It's like, it's which is fun, again, like you said, to kind of go back and forth between these larger budget, more well-known films, and then kind of going back, like we talked about The Deadly Spawn, which was again like a lower budget film and sort of like a homemade movie. Shot in a very short amount of time, and this is similar to that. What was that number that you again? This is not confirmed or anything, but we found
so
we did find the budget.
The budget I saw online, which I like the name, so I'll throw it out there, from theschlockpit.com, which actually, if you're a fan of this show, I don't really know this site, and they're not paying us to say this, but looks like a website that is pretty comprehensively interested in B movies, so go check that out. But the number I saw was $900,000, which is not tiny. It's not huge, but it's not, we're not talking like a go make it with your friends kind of movie at $900,000, especially with inflation. You're probably looking in today's money at least $1 million, $1.5 million, probably $1.5 million, which is not a tiny budget movie. Which I think it shows.
Like you said, you kind of made a joke compared to The Deadly Spawn. Like, at least this one was lit.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yes. There was clearly a crew of technicians involved in this one, which is fun in its own way.
Well, the director. I mean, we're going to talk. Usually, we talk about this more towards the end, but he was involved with a lot of different special effects and tons of different movies, and makeup and things like that.
Which is something that it seems to be a pattern with a lot of kind of these schlocky, fun 80s movies. Is a lot of the time it seems like they kind of start with the monster and with these special effects, and then build from there, with like we discussed with the Deadly Spawn. And I don't think this one was quite built like that, because the monster is, while it's in it a bit, it's not the focus of the movie.
Yeah, it's very little screen time for this monster.
Yeah, this movie is actually, I feel kind of strange saying this because of the feel of the movie, is actually kind of very character driven.
It is. Yeah.
Like it's a very character driven film, because it's really all about, you know, this kind of girl, this young woman. We'll get into the plot, but this young woman and her obsession and her kind of vengeful nature, and what draws her to these kind of dark, violent imagery. And also there's an interesting, I mean, we'll get there's also to hit on as we go further, before we jump too far ahead, and kind of surprisingly interesting dialogue about art and what is art in there.
Like sort of like a critique of, not really a critique, but more of like almost like a commentary. A commentary, on art and artists and.
But let's maybe dive into the plot before we, you know.
We'll start to get into that. But very first thing, I guess, like, were you aware of this film at all, Jeremy? But like before we decided to talk about it,
I think I had heard the name. You know, I find that every year, at least once a year, I end up looking up a list of bizarre '80s films, that to try to find things I haven't seen. And this one, so I'm sure I've come across it, but I was never one that really piqued my interest until we started talking about it as something we could do for this series.
Yeah, the name of the movie definitely drew me in, and the fact that it was about a creature. So I'd seen it. I saw it years ago, and then I remember being pretty, like, unimpressed, I guess would be the word, or just there was a lot of build up behind it, because I don't know why, for some reason I was so excited to see this movie. Yeah. And so when I finally saw it, I was, you know, I maybe because the creature itself isn't in the movie that much, I'm not sure what it was about it, but it's kind of like, I just kind of, you know, it was easily forgettable, I guess would be the way to say it. But rewatching it, I kind of had a new appreciation for it. Yeah. And what they were trying to do, and because it is more about. It's about more than just the creature and just the monster, you know, which is kind of cool. So yeah, we'll get into it. So the film starts with Jeffrey Combs, actually, of Reanimator fame. He plays the character Colin Childress, who's really only in this scene, but very important to the lore of the film. Yeah. We see him down in his basement studio. He's an illustrator. He's working on a comic book. And I guess at the same time sort of doing research on some sort of demonic evil rune. Which,
quick side note, I did notice somewhere later in the film, one of the characters had a Reanimator poster hanging up in their bedroom.
Oh, yeah, I saw that in the trivia. Yeah, I didn't notice it in the film, but...
It's kind of a funny, you know... I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if, you know, they told him that they were doing that, or if it was just kind of a fun little add-on.
Well, this director worked on Reanimator.
Oh, he worked on it. Okay,
and Bride of Reanimator, yeah. So, so yeah, that was a little Easter egg there, a little shout out. And so we see him, you know, illustrating this comic, and it's sort of interspersed with these POV shots from the outside, were very Evil Dead like, I thought, like kind of rushing up to the house and stuff like that. And he turns around, and the scene he's been depicting or drawing is being played out in front of him, of this monstrous creature, which is attacking this young woman. And so, I mean, we get right off the bat that there's some sort of mystical... I don't know if they ever entirely explain the lore. what the rune is, or like what the curse is exactly. I mean, they kind of go into it a little bit, but so yeah, I mean, but that's the basic conceit of the film, is that if you draw it will come.
There's an interesting thing that I you know, a little ahead, but here that I was thinking about, where in terms of the lore, I feel like it's totally possible that there actually is no lore and no monster. and that, you know what I mean? Because it's like,
oh, like it's all in their head.
yeah, like it's kind of just
yeah.
the thing that grips an artist, and it's like, you know, because if you think about it, like, you know, the whole story with this guy is because it says that the girl in the beginning was killed with an axe, and he was holding the axe. The monster didn't have the axe. So so I think, you know, it's possible that, you know, that maybe there's kind of something we're supposed to read between the lines. But I don't know. That's just a theory.
It's a very deep movie.
Yeah.
Now, one other thing I did want to mention before we get too into it is that this movie is a lean 77 minutes. It's very short.
Which I thought was the perfect length, honestly.
Oh yeah,
for like this kind of movie that's, you know,
for this kind of movie.
I thought that I you know, I sometimes like these kind of movies, they can be almost 2 hours and they can kind of drag, but when they're just like perfectly, you know, 80 minutes, 75, 80 minutes long, you just kind of get in, get out, and have a kind of fun, weird time. It's the best.
Oh yeah, and I also love when they stretch the opening credits out like they did.
Yeah.
The opening and the end credits are pretty long.
You can imagine them sitting there at the first cut and being like, "Ah, shit, it's only 73 minutes long. God, we gotta
stretch this out a little bit."
Yeah.
So then we see the credits, and then we're introduced to our main character of the film, Whitney Taylor. She's another illustrator or cartoonist, as she describes herself. At first I thought she was going for a job interview or something like that, but it appears that this is more of like a commune, I guess, or a college. It's kind of described.
I was thinking like an artist colony, you know, like
artist colony,
like kind of like a retreat kind of deal.
Right, which is funny because my novel that I wrote, Art Farm, is about an artist retreat, and I saw a lot of parallels between it.
Interesting.
The basic plot, you know, the characters and stuff like that. I saw a lot of parallels between that and this, which I certainly didn't make the connection before.
Are you sure that you didn't just plagiarize?
Yeah.
Cellar Dweller?
Yeah. It's basically just a Cellar Dweller adaptation. Yeah. Really. No, just, you know, I've always just been into artists. Where, you know, creativity, how they work, how they get their ideas and things like that. So that's always interested me. So that aspect of the film actually is really interesting to me. And there is some sort of like parody there. We'll get to one scene in particular that I thought was was pretty funny. So she, this woman, Whitney Taylor, this illustrator, she's a fan of the Cellar Dweller comic book. So I guess this was like sort of like a big. It kind of reminded me of like Tales from the Crypt, or you know, there's certain comics that are like that, like the horror comics. And she wants to create her own comic inspired by it. So it seems like she's in the right place. I mean, you're in the guy's house. So the guy who passed away under mysterious circumstances. Yeah. And we meet Mrs. Briggs, played by Yvonne DiCarlo, who is Lily from the Munsters. Yeah, it was very interesting. And she plays this very like strict, sort of. I guess she'd be like the dean of the school, the head of the school of the commune. So we at this point we learned that Colin Childress was, you know, like basically, according to legend, he went crazy. As you were talking about, Jeremy, and killed himself. Well, he murdered the woman and then killed himself by setting himself on fire. Apparently, that's what they're saying. And then, of course, she gives her that warning, like, don't go in the cellar, you know.
And then we immediately go in the cellar.
Immediately, in like the next scene. And so, yeah, this is basically an artist colony. We were introduced to the other artists living in the house. Including one person that she knows and is not a big fan of, Amanda. Amanda. Why? You know, it's just like so funny that they're in this house to me. Like, it's such like the perfect. I mean, I know it's for plot reasons, clearly, but like, why are they here instead of like anywhere else?
Yeah.
You know, it's like.
Yeah, you can kind of just imagine the art colony and this board of directors, which seems like a very large board of directors for a school with 4 people in it. But but you can just imagine them being like, where do we want to, you know, where are we going to put our art colony? Oh, in the murder house.
Remember, yeah, the murder house.
In the murder house.
Remember that guy who the axe murderer who yeah,
Who, because
set
he
himself
was
on
an
fire.
artist, lost his mind and killed people. Let's put a bunch of artists there and see what happens.
Seems like the perfect place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they're all in this house together, which again is sort of reminiscent of the idea for Art Farm, where it's kind of like this retreat in the middle of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
and all these artists are together. So again, this idea I find very enthralling,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was with it. And of course, Whitney finds herself drawn to the cellar that she's not supposed to go down, where Childress worked, and so she basically doesn't believe that he murdered the woman and set himself on fire. So she kind of becomes like this detective a little bit. Well, there is another detective. There's an artist pretending to be a detective, I believe.
Of Raymond Chandler.
Yeah.
Homage.
Yeah. And so, but she's like trying to get to the bottom of it. She thinks there's more to it than what is believed. Eventually, Mrs. Briggs commissions Amanda to videotape her. So she kind of follows her around with this very large, of the time VHS camera. And I always love Jeremy in movies whenever they use this conceit, because when they watch the footage back, as they inevitably do, it always appears like nicely framed and edited, and which does happen in a later scene in this movie when they watch back the footage of Whitney. And there's like this very nice close up of her, and the footage isn't grainy at all, and the camera's like not moving around.
Even though she was basically in the dark.
Yeah, she's like exactly. Many movies are guilty of that.
Yeah.
It's just one of those. Maybe being a filmmaker, you notice these kind of things.
You know what it is? I think it's that as filmmakers, there's a responsibility to express information clearly, and they just can't resist the temptation to do their job, to make it good. Yeah.
But so yeah, her and Amanda do not get along. Whitney and Amanda, and so Whitney is down in the cellar, and she's very angrily drawing a scene in a comic of Amanda encountering the cellar dweller. Now, what is a cellar dweller exactly? I mean, what's your take on this creature itself? Like, it's very tall. I know that. It's like, I mean, what kind of a creature is it? It really is just like a monster.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's kind of referential. There's something kind of like I guess almost like apish about it, but it also has like fangs and not ape-like ears. It's hairy, but It's kind of a hard one to place. Like it seems like kind of a combination of a lot of elements.
It's sort of like an amalgamate, of like different.
Yeah, like it seems, which is cool. I it's always fun in the same way with Deadly Spawn, where someone creates, a monster that's just totally its own thing. Like not really referencing anything else specifically. Like because it kind of had like almost werewolf ears. It also, I'm looking at an image now, had like the upside down pentagram on its chest. So maybe it's supposed to be, we know it's something kind of demonic, but maybe it's supposed to be like specifically a Satan adjacent, kind of creature.
Yeah, I guess I can see that. It's sort of like imp, like a tall imp.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
yeah. Because I feel like this almost looks like the kind of thing you would see in like what's his name, the guy, the Divine Comedy. Divine Comedy
Dante.
Drawings. I forget the guy's name. There's one guy.
Dante's Inferno, or
yeah, but it's from Dante's Inferno, but it's specifically Doré, I think is his name.
Oh, okay.
He did all these etchings. Gustave Doré, yeah. He did all these etchings, and he had these kind of strange demonic creatures that he would draw, and it kind of reminds me of that almost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has demonic features. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's cool that they made their own thing for this. I mean, how would you compare it to, I guess, the other creatures that we talked about so far?
I mean, I think it was, not as kind of gross and weird as maybe some of the other creatures.
Except for when it's eating.
Except for when it's eating, yeah. But it's eating with its one mouth and its hands. It's kind of eats just like an aggressive human. But I'm thinking about like Deadly Spawn or something like that. Like the way that monster existed,
multiple mouths,
and multiple mouths, and just dripping with goo, and it's like that felt a little more like if I'm going for like a real gross out kind of monster, that check the boxes. This one felt more like kind of a hunting animal kind of monster, but it talked, so it's a little kind of an in between,
Oh yeah, it does talk. You're right.
Just a little. It talks a little bit. It's not very chatty,
bit.
but it talks a little.
It's not very chatty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't really push the grossness factor.
No.
You're right about that.
But I don't know if they needed to. I don't think it was that kind of monster.
So the scene where she's drawing Amanda encountering the cellar dweller, of course, it actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy, I always enjoy a good banana peel pratfall.
that was a great bit.
Definitely, probably my favorite part of the movie. Yeah, she just to add insult to injury, she adds this banana peel that she draws in on the floor, and then of course Amanda slips on it, and she goes down. So and then this part was a little gruesome because there was similar to the Deadly Spawn. There's a lot of blood splatter on the walls in this part. And again, those eating effects were really well done, I thought.
Yeah.
Because that was pretty gruesome, the way he was just chomping and a little bit of blood was spurting out. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was pretty cool. And again, we'll go to another scene now, but at times the movie does seem like a parody of artists or kind of making some sort of a commentary on artists. And particular, when I felt this was with the performance artist scene.
I knew we had to bring that up.
We had to talk about this. This is I mean, she's just repeating death over and over. And
popping
sort of
balloons.
Dancing around.
Yeah,
stabbing balloons.
Yeah.
Death is sad. That was another
Death is
quote.
sad, yeah. And just dropping dolls on the ground. I thought that scene, it's it's, I wouldn't necessarily call this a horror comedy, because it doesn't really feel like it's trying to make jokes. But that was one of the funniest scenes I've seen in a movie in a while.
Yeah,
I was
an
just
overt comedy scene.
I was just totally unprepared because it's just played so straight, and they're all just sitting there, and she's in her tights with the music playing, which at the time I don't know if it would have been as funny at the time because that was just the kind of music you heard with commercials and stuff in the mid to late 80s. But
it comes out of nowhere when you hear it.
But now that music and that outfit and her is just even it's hysterical.
It's not that off base for some performance art that I've seen.
No, and that's what's so funny about it. Is it I was watching, I was like, oh, this is satire, but then I was just like, no, you could definitely see this. This is something you could definitely stumble across out in the wild in the art world.
For sure.
And that's what tickled me so much about it.
Yeah.
Because and that's what it was. It was the fact that it was the 80s music and the spandex is I could see someone doing that now. Just the little synthy music, wearing spandex head to toe, and just death.
Yeah, just over the top death. And their reactions to it. Well, they try to be nice to her, except for Philip. He's pretty much that was terrible.
Yeah.
What did I just watch, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Philip,
who finger paints.
Yeah, is that what he does? Finger paints?
At one point she was like, I'm gonna make the ultimate monster, and he goes, I'm gonna make the ultimate finger painting, which is a good set of lines.
Okay, so was he actually a finger painter though?
I don't know. He was an abstract painter.
Abstract.
So it's funny because as someone who went to art school, I find that the movie portrayals of art school are often, although I guess this isn't art school, it's more of a residency. But it seems to be in some kind of an educational setting because there's clearly a teacher and critique based, and in a lot of movie depictions of art school, it's kind of a little structureless, which was not my experience at all. Actually, art school I found to be very structured because they're trying to teach you how to make something and not just have you kind of running amok making things. Mm-hmm. So that's always just something that's kind of funny to me too, is just seeing not that people aren't making weird and wild stuff in art school, but it's kind of you have to work through the foundations to get to that point.
This did have the feel of more of a retreat.
It was more of a treat. Yeah. Kind of an educational, because they were all graduates of art school, so I guess it is realistic that could be the case.
So at this point, there is another victim that we mentioned. That I guess he's an actor, right? Because he's playing. In the beginning, he plays a mugger or robber, I guess.
I think he's a novelist. I think that was what I was picking.
Oh, he's a novel. Oh, okay, so he's doing research on characters.
I think he's because they mentioned Ray Chandler, who I actually this past summer read a bunch of his books, and they're awesome.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
He's great.
Worth reading.
Yeah.
But I think he's kind of supposed to be this Ray Chandler film noir kind of guy, which they had one scene that was very film noir. Like, it was kind of tonally out of, like, very different.
That's where
than
the
rest of
lighting comes into play.
Yeah, like they really let him exist. But I think the way I understood it was that he was someone who, in order to get, he was kind of a method writer. Like, in order to get in the headspace of writing his scenes, he needed to sometimes act them out with other people, even if it involved a real loaded gun and firing a real loaded gun at his friends.
Right.
Or near his friends. Which is, I mean, that's, I don't know if Marlon Brando would have even gone to that length.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme.
That's pretty method. But yeah, I think he was a writer. Because when we saw that noir scene, he used the, he said the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. A wildly original simile.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I guess metaphor.
Well, anyway,
I don't know. I don't know where that one falls.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he gets his head swiped off in the scene. Now, in this scene, the creature acts first and creates a page. So the page is created afterwards, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. So it sort of changes at this point. I guess they were kind of like, how are we going to get Whitney to keep drawing these scenes? That doesn't make any sense. So they kind of had, I guess they had to change it at some point. And Whitney discovers it's all because of the curse about summoning this beast. That's what happened to Childress, and that's what's happening to her now.
Yep.
Now something else happens that's different. So Mrs. Briggs, the sort of the head of this colony, turns into the monster.
Yeah.
And attacks her. So what do we make of that? Is that's
what I was, because I was kind of ready for the plot twist that she had been the monster this whole time.
She was the monster. Yeah, exactly.
But then it kind of didn't seem like that. It kind of seemed like the monster maybe like possessed her.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was more possession kind of thing. And at this point, so Whitney's trying to get away from it, and she spills white out on the page, right where the creature is, and the creature disappears. Pretty good solution to that problem. But the creature isn't really dead. The hand pops out of the page and starts coming for her. And I like in this part how she uses the whiteout. It's sort of like it's The Exorcist, and she's making signs of the cross with it. Mm-hmm. When she's like trying to like ward off the creature or whatever, she's making signs of the cross with it. I mean, I don't know if she did that intentionally or not, but I just thought it was very funny to be using whiteout in that way. But it kind of makes sense, for what she's trying to do. She's trying to send it back to its own netherworld. And then all the victims come back in like this sort of happy ending, starting with Philip, her I guess love interest in the movie. And all the characters come back. I guess because she redraws them, right? She draws them again on the paper. Yeah. And now at this point, this is where things kind of take a turn. We had talked about these like last little things at the ending. We talked about it in a couple of movies. Well, Little Shop of Horrors was not a little one, but there's something similar in Deadly Spawn where you think the movie's kind of over, but really you're kind of in for something. So she sets the paper on fire, I guess first she draws the creature chained up, so it's like chained up and it can't move. Then she sets the paper on fire, but then we start to realize that the other people are on the page too, like Philip was on there and all the others. So it's sort of like this horrific like realization, like, oh no, that's not good.
Darn. And I guess that was the last of her paper, and she couldn't redraw them.
I guess not. Yeah, I guess she couldn't redraw. I didn't even think about that.
Or it could just go back and forth, I don't know.
Yeah.
She draws them, she destroys them, she redraws them. It's kind of a...
Maybe she is insane. She just...
that's crazy. Kind of a wicked power. Well, and that's why, now that we're at the end, that's why I was kind of theorizing that maybe, she just kind of got caught up in the whole thing and she just killed them all, because at the end there are no witnesses left.
That's true.
And, like, there are, if we're going to really analyze here, there are some inconsistencies in how the monster works. And, everyone at some point, even though she has this thing where she kind of loves, what's his name, Philip? She kind of loves him, but it's like he's kind of been a little pushy and weird with her and has, like, looked at her work and come down to the cellar without asking. And, all of them have kind of done something to scorn her somehow. And, so I don't know. That's why I was like, oh, at the end, maybe she's just kind of losing her shit and just murdered a bunch of people in a house, just like the first guy. And, the monster was really just within the mind of the artist, but the artist was the monster, him or herself.
Wherever there is imagination, I will dwell. That's what.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Which, and once again, imagination. Is it?
Yeah.
Is he
onto something here, Jerry?
Yeah. It's I obviously we don't have a definitive answer here. I guess we could try to reach out to Don Mancini. He's still alive, right? He's still around.
Yeah.
He's still around. Yeah. We could reach out to him.
He's making a TV show right now about Child's Play. So.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I guess we could try to reach out to him. I have a feeling we won't hear back on this one.
Yeah, probably not.
Although as a note,
I imagine he doesn't like to talk about this movie too much.
So it says this is, as of 2023, his only non-Chucky film, which is kind of wild actually for a guy who's had a career at this point for 35 years.
It's also cool that he's actually involved with every Child's Play work that comes out. Like he's always either a writer on it or a producer or director or something like that. So he definitely stuck with it, which is really cool. And so this is so this came out the same year, I believe, as Child's Play, 1988. So I imagine he probably wrote this first, and then once Child's Play took off, and he's like, all right, no more Cellar Dweller.
Which, like, what a whirlwind year,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because
he's probably he could have been like, my life is over.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, like, who knows?
I made this movie, and it just went, because you said this one went straight to video, right?
Yeah. So this is. Yeah, I believe so. It was released directly to VHS and Laserdisc, and this might be our first straight-to-home video release that we've talked about on the show.
It might be.
I believe. I can't think of any other one.
So Child's Play came out November 9th, 1988, and this one, I mean, September. So he was probably in September, just like, shit, like. Yeah,
that was a rough month for him, probably.
It was, and then 2 months later, he had like the biggest horror movie of the year. It's like, that would be, I would imagine that would be like a real emotional kind of roller coaster.
Yeah, for sure. But it is interesting that it's the only work he did that wasn't Chucky related. I mean, have you seen the Child's Play movies? Do you see his hand in this at all? Like, do you think it's like, could be, I don't know.
A little bit. This one, I mean, and I'm just guessing here, it's possible he wrote Child's Play way earlier because as all artists know, progress is not linear. So it's possible that Child's Play was not written first, but I would guess that this was an earlier piece of writing that maybe had been.
That's my guess too.
I mean, let me see. I just want to kind of get a sense of, because I don't know too much about Don Mancini. So he was born in '63, so he was still pretty young when both of these movies came out, actually. Yeah. But like, it's possible that this was a movie he wrote when he was like 20 years old, and was very much still like.
Just trying to get into the biz,
and just trying to figure out how to write a movie, And it's possible that he wrote this one which I don't know, but it's possible he wrote this one way younger, and then this one was kind of the jumping off point, and then once he kind of was grounded in how to write a movie, then he moved on to Child's Play. But I could be wrong. I don't know. It's possible he wrote Child's Play first, and this one was just kind of a bizarre detour he took.
Who knows? Maybe this was the one that he was like really inspired to write, and
who knows?
He was putting all his hopes in, and
or maybe as a lot of writers experience in their time, particularly in the horror genre, they write their bigger, more expansive movie, which would have been Child's Play, but then he couldn't get money for it, and then is like, I need a one location thing, and so he wrote this one location movie. Who knows? But it did feel like Child's Play was kind of a more expansive, built out lore. Like it felt like there was kind of a little more thought given to the world, the kind of world building and what the monster, I guess if you call Chucky a monster, really was. Whereas this one, it felt a little looser, a little shorter.
It feels like an early work.
It feels earlier, earlier, or maybe kind of more business driven.
Right.
Like I'm gonna make this because it's one location, and I'm gonna write it in a couple months, and we're gonna go shoot it. But all this is speculation. It's like we said, it's very possible that he spent years writing this, and this was his thing that he fell in love with, and maybe Chucky was the thing he's like, I'm just going to write that in a month.
Right. And you never know. Really.
Or it's Child's Play, not Chucky, but yeah.
Yeah, what's going to take off and what isn't.
Yeah, artists are often, and which is kind of the point of this film in a way. Artists are often not the best judges of their own work,
Yes,
and the risk you can't control. Once your work is out in the world, it becomes its own beast.
Yep, that is very true. And I did want to talk a little bit about the director, John Carl Buechler. We're going to say that's how we say his name. So he didn't direct too many films. I believe about 16. Well, actually, that's a lot.
That's quite a bit of films. Yeah,
that's a lot. Yeah,
that's twice as many films as Paul Thomas Anderson, or I guess he probably has 9. But that's quite a bit. That's a lot of movies.
Yeah. No, he directed. I mean, just to throw out some names that our cult audience may recognize, The Dungeon Master, which a lot of times gets packaged along with this movie, like they'll put them on the same disc or something like that. And the original Troll 2 is like one of, we've talked about it on this show. It's one of the notorious terrible movies out there. And he directed the original Troll. And let's not forget Ghoulies Go to College. He also directed.
Which, side note, I was just in looking him up a little bit and looking at, because I've never seen the original Troll. I've only seen Troll 2.
Yeah, I think I've only seen the second.
Which is just a few fun facts about that, because I feel like I need to go watch it now. One is Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in it.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting. And 2, I'm just looking at the list of cast, and there is a character named Harry Potter in it, which is that's just kind of a fun nugget of information.
Yeah.
But,
well, I believe the second one has no affiliation with the first one.
Yeah,
at all. It's one of those in-name things only. So.
It's kind of like Prom Night 2, Hello Mary Lou.
Exactly. Or Halloween 3.
Or Halloween 3. Yeah, it's which happened a lot in the 80s. I feel like that's not a thing you see as much anymore, where there's just a total departure. Now it seems like most sequels are really trying to build out and expand upon the lore, whereas in that decade it seemed like there were often sequels that were just trying to use the name of the first movie to make a completely different movie.
They're more like a one-off kind of idea.
Yeah.
Or like, we have this script, how could we make it work?
Yeah, you just
part of a franchise.
Change this monster to a troll, and
Yeah, exactly.
Or there's a scene in this movie that takes place at a prom. Okay, Prom Night 2,
Prom Night 2, there it is. But he was involved with a lot of makeup and special effects, like I mentioned earlier. And on many films, including Reanimator, which we talked about earlier. And obviously the actor from that was in this. Bride of Reanimator, From Beyond, the Garbage Pail Kids movie, including the original Ghoulies and the sequel as well. So he was involved with that franchise. So yeah, I mean, he worked on a lot of different special effects, and I guess this was kind of like his, we talked about, like, sometimes you have the monster first and you kind of build the movie around it, and it kind of it has that feel to it, which isn't a bad thing, I don't think. I
mean, you have to think that's probably why he was. I mean, what had he directed anything before this, or was this his? No, he had directed a few movies, but he had directed Troll already. But you have to think that this, probably a big reason why he's getting hired for these movies is because of his special effects background.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Because ultimately, it's just thinking about like how these movies were sold at that point. And it's like, you see a trailer or you see a few images on the box, and if you have a really good-looking monster, people are going to go see the movie. Yeah. And so it's like, which is kind of a cool thing, because it's kind of harder to imagine, someone from that end of it getting to direct now, short of them, like, writing their own really amazing script or, directing a really great short film. Like, the only situation I can think of where, like, I can think of someone, it's not a special effects person, but, like, the John Wick movies, the director of that started as a stunt person, and then kind of made his way. But same thing, my guess is that they probably had the script, and that's what drove that one, and then they're like, all right, well, we know you can pull it off. But it's like, I don't know, it's just interesting. Though. Yeah,
you're right. Like, a lot of these films, especially in the 80s, were sort of built around, like, when someone's walking through Blockbuster and they see this on the cover, are they going to want to see it or not? So you see this creature or this monster on the cover, and you're like, all right, I'll check this out.
Well, no, a lot of these guys,
it's hard to imagine now.
A lot of these guys, a lot of these special effects artists did end up directing at some point. If I'm correct?
It seems like it.
Like, it's not what they're really known for, but a lot of them kind of did slide into the director's chair from time to time. to try to make that leap to varying degrees of success. But
Right.
it is cool that they were able to go do that. It's exciting.
I was just wondering if Tom Savini.
I was literally looking up the same thing. I'm not seeing any directing credits for him.
No, I'm not seeing any.
Which is kind of surprising considering how many
That is
directors
surprising.
love him.
Yeah,
You know?
it's true.
Like,
maybe
he-
he's
like,
never had maybe he never had any interest in it.
Because he kind of maybe because maybe he just saw how stressful it was and was like, no,
Yeah,
I'm good.
yeah. I don't want to be involved with it.
Because he had longevity. Because he was, obviously he had all of the stuff he was doing in the 80s, but then well into the 90s, he had in the 70s. He's obviously, but like he had relationships with like Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino and like the kind of directors du jour of the mid 90s.
Yeah.
He probably at that point, after From Dusk Till Dawn, where he was in that, and he probably could have gotten his own movie made at that point, but
he has acted a lot in different movies, but
never slid to the director's chair, which is interesting.
yeah. Again, that's probably his choice at this point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's more to talk about with this film than you would think, I guess. When you first were looking at it. This one, Cellar Dweller, is certainly not talked about as much as some of other creature features out there. But what are your final thoughts about Cellar Dweller, Jeremy?
Cellar Dweller was fun. It's I think in this set of movies we've watched, it's not necessarily my favorite. But I enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I watched it for that performance art scene alone, if anything.
Yeah, that was great.
That that
was perfect.
It's short. It's a fun little watch. It's kind of a cool
Yeah.
If you end up at a horror trivia night and there's a cellar dweller question, it'll be like that. That you'll major props to know some cellar dwellers.
You get that. Yeah, you get respect for that one.
Also, just want to bring up because which we haven't been doing enough for this series, I realize. But the VHS cover, the slogan was "It'll eat you out of house and home," which is interesting because they are neither in a house nor home.
Well, I guess it is a house.
It is technically a house, but it's kind of more of a, I don't know, a communal living space.
Yeah.
Which is also funny just looking on Wikipedia. The image for the cover, which feels very in line with the movie and this kind of aesthetic, the image is not just the poster. It is clearly a VHS cover because there is a sticker that says 1285 on the front.
I just clicked on it because I was like trying to get a closer look. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, it's a sticker, which is fun because it goes to show that the people that have kept this movie alive are not the the powers that be. They are clearly people like myself and Mark and our listeners who just find these kind of curios and keep them going. So that was one note. A couple other things I just wanted to draw attention to. I'm looking at my notes here. One, I like the kind of primal scream scene. There was the one artist.
Oh yeah.
The artist friend. What was her name? It's escaping me. It was Whitney.
That was a good touch.
The lead artist. Amanda was the one we didn't like. The mean one.
It's probably Lisa.
Lisa was just outside screaming, and was just like, "Oh, I'm just getting it out of my system," which I thought
that was a good little
That was nice. Let's see. I like the film noir bit just because it was kind of so out of left field and fun.
Yeah, it was out of nowhere.
And then the banana bit, and then one thing I loved that was at the very end, in the credits actually, when it said cast. Above the cast, it had a note that said, "A good cast is worth repeating," which I love. It's just it's I think it is with indie film in general, but I think especially when people are making kind of lower budget horror films and it's maybe kind of earlier in their careers and they're just having fun with it. They kind of will do stuff like that, and I think this movie, it was clear that the people working on it kind of had fun with it.
Yeah.
And so that that was kind of heartwarming for me because as we've talked about many times on this show, for all of the things we talk about with film and the kind of film world in general and the kind of whole critical discourse around film, everyone can take it so seriously, but at the end of the day, it is just art, in the same way, like a film is really no more serious or important than that girl standing on the stage and just saying death and popping balloons.
Death.
It's all just how people choose to express themselves. So I think, you know, it's cool that it was clear people are having fun with this, and that always makes me happy to see.
It has heart to it when these lower budget productions, you know. And again, like you said, it's not like you're dedicating your whole night to this movie if you're watching it.
It's a short watch.
It's very short. It's fun. You know, it has an interesting idea behind it. And
A good double feature movie. You could easily slide this in with something else.
It is a great...
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Maybe one of his other movies, like The Dungeon Master or Troll.
Yeah.
You know, something like that would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought I had a good time with it. I appreciated it a lot more seeing it the second time, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Just the whole critique about artists and everything. The eccentricities about that and everything.
Yeah.
I thought were pretty spot on. And
Also,
interesting, and then different for a horror film. You don't usually see that too much.
Yeah, I'm also just looking now, because we're digging kind of deep. The guy who produced this was a guy named Charles Band.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who
He's
he's done, you know, it looks like he produced just a bunch of stuff and is still going strong producing weird schlocky horror movies. So that's also
his name is associated with a lot of schlock.
That's also comforting to see. Is, you know, he's responsible for Evil Bong, The Gingerbread Man,
Evil Bong 666, Evil Bong 777,
The Creeps. He's been around, and since it looks like the 70s. So also just, you know, always cool to see someone just continuously doing their thing outside of the comforts and security of the mainstream. Like he's doing this all on his own and continues to do it. So maybe, you know, check out his stuff as well if you're into this kind of thing.
The Ginger Dead Man.
I said gingerbread. Dead Man. That's what I meant. Yeah.
He's passionate about his schlock. So check out more of his stuff for sure.
I'm seeing a documentary called Badass Motherfuckers. Pardon my French. So I don't know what that is, but
doesn't say what it's about. Now I'm curious.
No, yeah, but I'm very curious now. I'm gonna have to look into some of this guy's movies because it's.
I'm
cool.
assuming exploitation, something about exploitation movies probably, but
yeah, he's really done a lot of stuff through the years. So
yeah, I should check out more of his work actually.
Yeah, so that's cool. It's a reason to kind of dig into.
There you go. Yeah.
He did Creepazoids. Also, he produced that. It looks like, which was
Creepazoids. That was another movie
another film we were
discussing.
talking about maybe doing, and Rawhead Rex. So
did he?
It looks like he Empire International Pictures, which I think is his company. Yeah. So he produced them. He didn't direct them.
Okay. Okay. I see. Yeah. There's different lists. Okay.
So actually, a guy who's kind of very important in the 80s creature feature space. So
yeah,
cool discovery. You know, I didn't really heard of
definitely.
him. So.
Yeah, the movies he's produced is like, so if you add those in, there's even more.
Yeah, quite a
lot of them.
Extensive filmography.
Terror Vision, Troll, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, yeah, a lot of these. Okay, yeah, I mean, you could just take this list and have a great couple weekends. You know, just have a really good time. So yeah, I mean, this movie was a good time, and I like I said, I enjoyed it even more watching it this time, and I'm glad we got to talk about it on the show. I'm glad we kind of go back and forth between these different types of films.
Mm-hmm.
Next time, we are going to discuss what, in my opinion, would be sort of from both camps. The movie Pumpkinhead. It's sort of, it's well known, but it's not really discussed in the same breath as other. Like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th or movies like that. So it's sort of in between there. So I think it's like a cool one to end on.
Yep.
And so we'll be discussing that next time to close out our series. But until then, thanks so much for listening to Cult Movie Cult. You can find us on the usual social media. If you have any cult films you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, or if you'd like to officially join the cult, be a guest on the show, please feel free to reach out to us at cultmoviecult@gmail.com. This has been Cult Movie Cult, and until next time, so long from the other side.